man. Happy spring break. You're at the end of it.
Oh, absolutely. It's always nice to be on spring break. Plus, what even makes it nicer, it seems like a lot of spring breaks in Oklahoma. It's cold and all, and we've actually got had a rough day on Monday with the weather. Then each day's gotten better, and it's going to be beautiful for these next few days. So we're definitely going to enjoy these days of weather.
Well, not only has the weather gotten better, 3 wins in a row. Spring break. Your kids like spring break.
Well, Daniel, we found some different ways to win some ball games. We've been close earlier in the year a couple times. Just didn't do enough things right, and against Elk City and Victory Christian, we made plays at the right time, scored enough runs. So it was definitely encouraging to see the fruits of your labor, the work that we put in to be able to come to the win-loss column. So we had a good trip to Broken Bow. It was good for our players, good for our families, and of course good for our coaching staff.
That's awesome, man. And, sometimes it comes through adversity. You've talked about this over the last, year, that adversity, you just got to continue to grind. And you had a really tight district game against Coweta as well. You didn't come out on top, but you just one run. How do you think that may have played into what the guys were able to turn around and now go 3 in a row right after that game?
Well, like we've been stressing them, is that we want to become a good club. And to be a good club is that you don't beat yourself. And that means that if you're going to beat somebody good, you got to go out and beat them, which means you got to basically do more things they do right than vice versa. And the other part is you got to believe that you're going to win too. Sometimes it's like the old snowball gets rolling. Do we have the capacity? Do we have the mental capacity? Do we have the physical ability to be able to stop the snowball from rolling? For an example, in yesterday's ball game, we walked the leadoff guy, and then we get a double play. We were able to erase him, which was huge. And so, those are the differences in the ball game, especially in the close ball games, or can we manufacture one more run that we may need, even though the score may be 10-4. We got to continue to score because the consistency. That's the thing, is we're trying to develop consistency on the mound, consistency on defense, and also at the plate. And, when you really look at good baseball teams, the one column that I always look at is the errors column, because if you can play defense, you're going to give yourself a chance. They talk about in football, well, championship teams are built off defense. Well, really, baseball is the same way. Because that way, most teams aren't going to just constantly, hit. It's due to either some walks, sandwich around, maybe a walk in air, or hit by pitch, and then it can get away from you. In baseball, you can play great for 7, and in the one inning you give up, a crooked number, and then you get beat. And so that's the consistency part of it.
Well, we love to talk about good teams beating good teams. That's why I bring up Coweta. They're sitting 10-2. They're 4-0 in the district. That's a team that you can really level up against, I guess, if you're a freshman or a sophomore, to say, hey, this is a team we want to beat. And so coming so close to that really good team, I thought was a good indicator. Talk a little bit about your coaching staff and how they're feeling about their hitting drills and their pitching drills. Talk a little bit about practice, Coach. Have you had much time to practice over spring break? I know you've played 4 games.
The thing about it is it's a preparation before, it's a preparation after. Something we stress in our guys is that the game is like a test. And if you just take the test every single day, you're going to score a few points up and down. But if you don't prepare each day for the test, then it's not going to change. So it's a preparation before and after that part of it. In fact, we gave them a couple of days off. I told him, I said, it's all for as a team, but you as an individual, you have some things you have to do. And so that's something it's just something you do every day. If you go to a big league game, the game may be a 7:05 game time, but those guys ain't rolling in at 6 o'clock and ready to play. No, those guys are getting there early, and they're getting their earlier work done. They're getting themselves prepared. We're setting at 5-5, and I told the guys, I said, a lot of people would be satisfied at 5-5, which is nice to be back to 500. But I said, we had the opportunity to be actually 8-2. There's 2 that we just got beat, and then there was 3 that if we played better in different capacities, we could have been 8-2. But again, they're growing opportunities, they're learning opportunities, and that's why in baseball you got to keep every day we're getting better. The other thing too is that it's not always about wins. Yeah, we want to win, but are we getting better each day, because our ultimate goal is to be able to play once the playoff gets on, is to be able to extend after the playoffs, into the next week. So that's what our goal is, to try to get better each day.
Well, coming up, and we talk about getting better each day. Coming back from spring break, you host a home and home versus Durant, and they're sitting on top of your district, right up there with Coweta. What are you talking to about your boys about that game? Again, it's another one of those litmus tests. You came in the home and home against Coweta. I mean, really 3 runs. It was a 2-run loss and a 1-run loss. You were right there in those games. How about getting over the top with Durant?
Well, I think it's more about us than them. Mm-hmm. It's controlling the variables that we can control. Really, it's not playing to the scoreboard or playing to the opponent. It's playing to what our standard is, and that's being able to, be able to command the strike zone, quality at bats, situational baseball, and play solid defense. And that's the thing about it. If we'll play solid defense, which means that last column that has an E on top, there's zeros or ones. Mm-hmm. we're going to have a chance most days, day in and day out. And that's something that we have to really get better at. And that's being in the right spot, throwing to the right base, all those different things that we have to be able to do. It's kind of like when the ball goes up, there's 9 people are moving somewhere as opposed to 9 people watching. And that's just, through repetition.
Well, talking about in the field, errors, and getting better, Corbin Wood seems to be able to play anywhere on the field. He's a senior leader, of course. What about those young guys, Coach, the freshmen and the sophomores? From the day that you saw them first, so sophomores last year and freshmen this year, are there some that are really standing out, that are getting better in the field and have been impressive to you?
Well, the thing about our club, we don't have just a guy that just plays third, just plays short. Mm-hmm. And depending on who's pitching, will it depend on on who's playing where. When this guy pitches, you may play first. When this guy pitches, you may play third. When this guy pitches, you may play outfield. And really, we're still searching to try to find, who actually can play where and be the best at that position. And so it's kind of like in our batting lineup. We don't have a 1 through 9 that we know that day in and day out. We're still, continually trying to find. Right now, the puzzle is not put together perfectly. We're still trying to find, how each of those pieces will match up. With our pitching wise, it's really been pitching by committee. Just like yesterday in the game that we won, we started out with Cruz. Then from Cruz, we went to Criswell, Gregson, and then Childers, saved it in the end for us. And so it's been a lot of pitching by committee. And so those guys have to be, it may be a long relief this day, maybe a short relief, maybe a starter. So again, that's all, we're just trying to be able to figure it out. And a lot of that's just due to being young. Part of it, and it's all about the consistency. It's like anything else. If you have consistency, at least you know what you're going to get day in and day out. And that's what we're trying to develop, is the consistency in all components of the game of baseball. And, and really, we talk about young, and really, to me, I think that when you really look at it, it's like game experience. And I told those guys, I said, some of you guys got 2 years of varsity experience. We that means we should be more or less like a veteran. Even though you're a freshman and sophomore, that's 2 years of varsity experience. A lot of people don't get varsity experience till their junior year. So we have to capitalize on that actual varsity experience. So the game should be slowing down for us.
A couple that you mentioned that are pretty solid at their positions, like Cruz. I don't know that I've seen Cruz on the mound. Who catches when Cruz is pitching?
Well, when Cruz is pitching, Red Hokett catches. And so really, every one of the infielders has to be able to play third, has to be able to play short, has to be able to play second. Some of those guys may play first and third, or play an outfield position. And so that's the other part too. When you're going to play multi-positions, that means you have to do more work at those positions. It's not just like I take just reps at short. I have to take reps at second. I have to take reps at third, or if you're an infield outfielder, then I got to take outfield reps. I got to take infield reps. So there's a lot more on them, which means it makes it a little bit tougher. But that's just what it's kind of the hand we're dealt. We have to deal with. And plus we lost one of our players has a concussion, and when you take a player out of the mix, then it's it's kind of that the next person that has to step up. But when you take out a really good defender, it definitely can put a little bit more stress and toll on your defense.
So who is that 10th guy that comes in the field? Who's your go-to when one of the regular starters are out?
Well, it really kind of depends on if it's if it's an infield position or if it's an outfield position. That really kind of, depends on that part of it. It's like with our JV, we've been able to get a few more innings with our JV, which in turn we're trying to bring some of these other guys along to be able to maybe slide them in eventually into, helping us out on the varsity, which would give us a little bit more depth. And so it's everything we do is really by committee. That's the thing about it. It's just like in yesterday's ball game, every one of our runners scored one time across the plate, and we had ones across two, so it gave us 10 runs. And it wasn't necessarily due to just really it's being able to understand the strike zone, strike zone awareness, being able to not have a swing out of the zone, and it's being able to capitalize on the pitcher's ineffectiveness to be able to command where walks are huge for us. Being able to move runners is a big part of it, and then sandwich a few hits in there, or the short part of the ball game, being able to lay the ball down creates pressure on them. And like I said, we scored 10, and everybody scored one run, so that's huge. If you can score, they say a run a ball game, a 7-inning ball game, you have a good chance to win. Well, we scored 10, which and like I said, no lead is safe for sure.
For sure. Well, so Rhett would come in normally from his regular second base position. The same thing has to happen with Childers, I think. Who goes over to first when Childers steps to the mound?
Well, when Childers steps to the mound, it all depends. Like yesterday, since Cruz had pitched, we didn't want to run him back behind the plate, so we left Rhett there, and Cruz played second. Criswell went to third, and Wells played short.
And who went to first?
And then Gregson was at first.
Gregson. So Gregson's another one I think that's been impressive throughout the year. His right field, first base, pitching, and at the plate. Talk a little bit about Gregson. What do you think about him?
Well, the thing about it, he does something that a lot of our pitchers don't do. He throws with his left hand. And, you just don't see as many in baseball left-handed pitchers as you do right-handed. So it gives him an advantage there. Also, as a left-hander, controlling the running game. I think if you just have a decent move, that gives you another plus on that side of it. And so he brings something out of the bullpen from the left side for us. And like we said, he's a left-handed hitter, which is, another different from, seeing it from the left side, the right side. And so really he's another one in that mix. They each have strengths and they each have abilities, and it's being able us as a coaching staff to be able to maximize their abilities, putting them in situations where they can be the most successful. And that's what we're trying to do, give them situations most successful. For an example, it may be, we're looking at here situation, then we may need you to bunt because that's probably going to be the situation going to be the best for you. Or it may be we need you to hit and run, or we need you to sack. So it's just a variety of things. And so really when you look at it, it's kind of like you got a check sheet here. Okay, for us to win the Shawnee Wolves, we have to be able to check all these boxes. Don't have to do them really exceptional, but we have to be good in all the different areas. And that's what a lot of our guys do, is that at a time they got to be able to steal a base. Time they got to be able to move a runner over. Time they got to be able to hit a ground ball in the middle or sack ball in the outfield. And so that's really kind of, it's just not like there's one guy. No, it's everybody. And without that one piece, the puzzle's not complete. So that's what really makes our club unique. It's not like we have this one person. No, everybody has that piece, and the puzzle for it to be, complete, to be perfect, everybody's got to put their piece together.
Well, and talking about pieces, that sounds like your teams in the past, Coach. There were from a few standout players who just had really good natural ability, and obviously they were in your program, so they applied themselves to try to become optimal. But you seem to, like I've asked 4 times about single individuals, you always go back to team. Talk a little bit about that in your philosophy for bringing this team back to the championship caliber that I know you're striving to get to.
Well, Daniel, everybody, it's kind of like everybody gets to eat. Nobody doesn't get to eat. You know, it's part of being a team. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's a family, because, you know, families have some disconnects and this and that. It's about being a team and becoming a great teammate. You know, for an example, we got some guys that don't play as much, but you know what? They're very vocal on the bench. When you ask them to do different things, they do that. And, you know, that's hard to do, because a lot of people, you know, that's their ultimate goal is to play. But, you know, say, hey, what my role is today, I've got to be a cheerleader today. My role is today, I've got to chase a foul ball. My role is today, I'll be the courtesy runner, and be happy about it. And part of that too is that we're really big on earning. Everything you get, you're going to earn. In fact, we went to Broken Bow, and the guys that went earned the opportunity. They did the things about, you know, we talk about becoming elite, becoming optimal, being fully committed. They earned that right. And that means showing up every day. That means showing up with a good attitude. Yeah, it's a team. I've always been a team guy. In fact, when I've had, you know, so-called elite players, I made sure that they were going to be held to the highest standard, higher than anybody else. And that means that they were going to, it's kind of like with the Thunder SGA. And when you read stuff about them, if you follow them, you see why they're so good. And it's because SGA is held to the highest standard. And so everybody else has to fall in line. And I think that's very, very important. It's kind of like, as a parent, you treat one child different than the other. If you do, you're gonna have a problem at home. Well, you know what? No, these are all our children. So that's, you know, we love them, and we're gonna, you know, they're gonna have the same standards on, you know, for everybody, no matter if you never get to play or if you get to play. But they get to be. But at the end of the day, they wear the Shawnee across or the Wolves across their chest, which, you know, that's that self-pride, you know, that you feel. That, and that's the other thing too, is that there's been a lot of great players that have come through this program. A lot of them are coaching, a lot of them are different things. And when I run them, they always ask, you know, they want to know, how is Shawnee baseball? You know, how are things going? And so they're representing, you know, the 2026 club, but they're also representing people that have paid, you know, have played in the past, and it's been a big part of their success even today.
Well, talk a little bit about those team stats for us, Coach. How are we sitting from a stat standpoint, in your view, like in batting average and in our fielding categories? How are we doing?
Well, our fielding percentage has to go up if we're gonna win with consistency and be good people. That has to improve. And batting wise, is that the same? I'm not necessarily concerned about the average. I mean, it would be nice if the averages would go up, but it's being able to be able to manufacture or to be able to take advantage of the other team's mistakes. You know, if they walk somebody, wild pitch, pass ball, are we able to take the extra base because they missed the cutoff man? And so that's what teams do. They take advantage, you know, kind of read the ball down in the dirt properly, even though nobody would know, but I read it properly. I get to second base. Now it takes one hit to score as opposed to two hits. So all those things go into success for us. And like I told them the other day, I said this weekend, there was probably only two or three times in the 3 ball games that we played that we had back-to-back hits. But we found a way to score 10 runs, and 7 runs and win 3 games. So it's just not all about, you know, that part of the card. In fact, our goal is, when we go to the plate, is not to get a hit. Because if that is your goal, you could do everything right and the umpire rings you up on a bad pitch. Or you could hit the ball, square it up, hit it the farthest ball you ever had, and the guy makes a great play and catches it. So really, when we talk about success, it's off of you hunting, not looking. You're hunting like you're out hunting an animal. Your pitch and getting off your best swing. And if you do that, that's success. And so that because, you know, if you've ever played, it's not easy when you step up there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a game where that ball's moving. You don't know what's coming. You know, it's like yesterday's mound was a little different as a pitcher. Every mound is different. You know, the surroundings are different. So it takes a, you know, really, you have to be really tough mentally to be able to allow your physical abilities to play in a positive, you know, situation for you. So that's part of really it's just baseball itself. So it goes back to, yeah, that's why we keep a situational chart, Daniel, that shows like getting the leadoff guy on. Then we keep do you move runners, 2-out RBI. We look at hard contact. We look at, can you score a run, dirt ball reads, a hard 90, all those things add up that the average person has no clue what that means. Then we also keep a counts chart, which we're looking at, a guy may be 1 for 10, well, it tells you know what? Hey, we probably need to maybe reevaluate why we're swinging early. We look at amount of at-bats and 2 strikes as opposed to amount of bats and not 2 strikes. You have a guy goes up there and he's got 75% of his bats with 2 strikes. I promise you he's not going to hit for high average because it's much more difficult, to hit. When you get to 0-2, it's the lowest batting average. So you're trying to fight to get to 3-2, where the average starts increasing because it becomes more of a getting back to hitting a fastball. And that's why, so there's a lot of information we use for our guys to really see, what they're doing as opposed to just the average itself. But most people are caught up in the average, where we're caught up in the other things that can allow the Shawnee Wolves to win.
Well, I definitely grabbed that, and I've never heard that I'm aware of about hunting a pitch and getting your swing on that pitch. And you didn't even mention hitting it or contact. You just mentioned your swing. That simple.
Well, and that's the thing about it is that because it's like anything else is that a lot of guys get themselves out because they swing out of the zone. Mm-hmm. And there's so much data and stuff out there, and if they've got these sophisticated hit tracks and Rapsoda, all these different things that will track all this. And if let's say that over the course of a year we have so many swings and misses out of the zone, how many times would that equate to a walk? Then after so many walks, how many runs does that equate to? So it's being able to have an understanding of the strike zone. That's a big part of it. But with high school baseball, you're getting umpires that every game the strike zone is different, or sometimes every inning the strike zone is different, or sometimes every pitch to pitch the strike zone is different. So that's the other part, but it's being able to really understand that. And that's the big thing too. We stress our guys is that great hitters have an understanding of the strike zone, what to swing at and what not to swing at. But that's what that thing about it is, it's like when you talk to people, you go to clinics and stuff, you pick up information, and I would have been a lot better hitter if somebody would have told me it was okay, you're going to make outs. Nobody ever told me that. And so we've really tried to simplify it for them to try to, realize that it is difficult. And so they can have success even though they make outs, because, that's being result driven. And it's more about getting caught up in the process. What is the process for you to have success? If the process is good, your success can be, but sometimes we're too result driven.
Well, to my knowledge, you weren't a Hall of Fame player, but you are a Hall of Fame coach. And I always get so much different type of information from you, Coach, in the way in which you think and understand the game. That's got to make the game so much more fun, so much more fulfilling for all of your players. I really appreciate being able to spend this time with you and talking a little bit. Thanks for
Daniel. Well, Daniel, I will tell you this is that I'm very blessed with Troy, Eli, and Jaden. They bring, each of them bring certain strengths to our program. They are, as players grow, they're growing as coaches each day. I rely on them. I trust them in the process. And so it's just not just about, me as the head coach. And really, my goal is that I want to prepare them that they want to be a head coach, that way they can go out there and be successful. And that's what I try to do. So I give them a lot of responsibilities, but I trust them in those responsibilities. And it's kind of like our players, the players that want to go on, we're going to prepare them so when they go to some program, they're not going to be caught off guard. They're going to have an understanding of, hey, what it really takes to be successful and what it takes to play at the next level. So that's kind of what what we're working to. So no, it's we're starting, I guess it would be week 4. Mm-hmm. And so we've played 10 games, so which means we're almost a third of our season has been completed, and we have definitely made some strides. We're looking forward to getting back on the 23rd versus Durant, and you know what we're doing, we're slowly narrowing in the margin, and you never know when that one victory may jumpstart you, and then all of a sudden, man, that snowball's got rolling. People have a hard time stopping it when the Shawnee Wolves, show up.
Well, ShawneeCTV is going to show up on your home date versus Bethel, and we look forward to that, Coach. Before that happens, I'll talk with you, I hope, again next week. Certainly, again, I reiterate, always a pleasure talking with you, Coach Jeff Shafer. Thank you.